2:47 a.m. The ER doors exploded inward. Corpseman dragged in a Navy SEAL convulsing violently, foam seeping from his mouth, veins blackening beneath his skin. Monitors screamed cardiac arrest. The lab had 0 matches. He had 47 minutes. The blonde rookie nurse stepped forward. She didn't grab the crash cart. She drew his contaminated blood and injected it into her own arm. The room froze. Someone shouted she was insane. She met their eyes and said, "I helped build this weapon, now watch me break it. This wasn't supposed to happen." 3 years ago, she was the military's top biochem specialist, designing classified nerve agents in a Maryland lab. Then she vanished. No resignation, no body, just an empty apartment and deleted clearance. Now she scrubbed bedpans under a false name, hiding from those who once called her indispensable. The toxin killing this SEAL was her final project. And as her own pulse began to race, one question burned: could she synthesize the antidote before her nervous system collapsed? The first wave hit her 30 seconds later. Not pain, knowledge. A metallic bloom flooded her tongue exactly as she had predicted in the Maryland lab 3 years prior, organophosphorus binding to acetylcholinesterase. She gripped the stainless steel counter, knuckles whitening, and spoke into the stunned silence. Phase 1. Sympathetic overload, pupils constricting. "Someone check me." A resident lunged forward with a penlight, hands trembling. She was right. Her pupils had shrunk to pinpricks, the irises nearly swallowed by darkness. 3 years ago, she had been Dr. Elena Voss, lead architect of Project Aegir at US Amric, 29 years old. The youngest researcher cleared for lethality synthesis in the facility's history. She had designed this specific molecule to defeat standard NATO antidotes, creating a binary agent that crossed the blood-brain barrier within 90 seconds of exposure. The memory flashed: subterranean labs, HEPA filtration. The night she watched the primate test subjects seized despite maximum atropine doses, the safety protocols she designed had failed. She destroyed her clearance that evening, walked out at 3 a.m., and became Sarah Miller, trauma nurse. Now her own creation was crawling through her arteries, and she had 37 minutes to reverse engineer a cure she once swore would never need to exist. Her left hand began to tremor. She ignored it. "I need a synthesis rig." "Now, Dr. Chen," the attending blocked her path. "You're seizing. You can't work a lab." She met his eyes, and something cold and absolute in her gaze made him step back. "I'm the only person on this continent who knows the stereochemistry of this toxin move, but the real problem wasn't the formula, it was the clock." In the trauma bay behind her, the SEAL flatlined again. 4th time in 12 minutes. They had pumped him full of atropine and pralidoxime. The standard military cocktail was useless because she had built Aegir specifically to resist 2-PAM, to laugh at the drugs that saved victims of sarin and VX. The poison had been designed as a scalpel, not a hammer. It targeted the central nervous system while masking its progression behind peripheral symptoms. The veins in his neck were visible now, blackened lines tracking toward his temples. He had been exposed 8 hours ago during a black site extraction in Eastern Europe. The transport pilots had radioed ahead with one word: unknown. But she recognized the protein marker in his blood. Batch 7, her batch. She injected the blood into her arm not as sacrifice, but as ruthless calculation. She needed to feel the progression, to map the metabolic pathway in real time, to know exactly when the acetylcholinesterase inhibition would peak. As her diaphragm began to spasm, she started dictating: pyridostigmine base, 4 milligrams, add diazepam for seizure prophylaxis. But the pralidoxime needs modification. Methyl group at the quaternary nitrogen. Increase lipid solubility. She coughed, tasted copper. Dr. Chen was scribbling frantically on a purple glove. "You're describing an entirely new molecule, one that crosses the blood-brain barrier," she gasped. "Because LLNL02 doesn't exist in this hospital, you have to build it." She slid down the wall, legs losing coordination, her vision tunneled. The SEAL's cardiac monitor screamed a sustained tone. Time was folding in on itself. She had perhaps 6 minutes of useful consciousness left. Her fingers went numb. Then the elevator chimed, not the patient elevator. The service lift reserved for biomedical waste. The doors opened and 6 men in matte black tactical gear stepped out, weapons shouldered but not raised. The lead figure wore no insignia, just a patch on his shoulder she knew intimately, a raven in flight against a gray background. Her old unit, The man removed his helmet. He was older, gray at the temples, but she knew the scar above his eyebrow. "Dr. Voss," he said, "or do you prefer Nurse Miller now?" She tried to speak, but her vocal cords were paralyzing, the toxin advancing faster in her smaller frame. The man knelt beside her, producing a small titanium case. The SEAL didn't just encounter this toxin in the field, he was injected with it. He looked at her with something between pity and accusation. "Serial number 7-9 Bravo. Your personal batch. From your private refrigeration unit. Someone wanted us to find you." And as her vision faded to black and her lungs began to lock up, she realized the poison wasn't just killing them. It was a hand-drawn map leading straight to her grave. The scarred man snapped open the titanium case. Inside, a phial of clear liquid caught the fluorescent light, atropine sulfate, 20 milligrams, military grade. He drew the full dose into a syringe and plunged it into her thigh without asking permission. Her diaphragm unlocked with a violent spasm. She jackknifed forward, gasping, sucking air in ragged pulls that burned like broken glass. "You don't get to die yet, Dr. Voss. Not until we know who else has your formula." She coughed, tasting the chemical bitterness of the antidote fighting the poison. Her vision cleared enough to see the tactical team securing the trauma bay. Nurses and residents were pressed against the walls, hands raised. The SEAL's body lay motionless beneath a sheet, monitors still screaming flatline. They had given up on him. All resources had shifted to her. The scarred man hauled her upright, gripping her shoulders with fingers that dug into bone. "Listen carefully. Batch 7-9 Bravo was archived, frozen, kept in a vault that requires biometric clearance and a presidential waiver. It never went to the field. It never went anywhere. So how did it end up in a black site in Belarus?" She shook her head, trying to clear the atropine haze. "Impossible. I destroyed my samples before I left. I watched the incinerator cycle. Then someone pulled them from the ash," he said. "Or you lied." He released her abruptly and she staggered against the counter. The SEAL wasn't on an extraction mission. He was on a delivery. The toxin was meant for a Russian asset, a defector with intel on Moscow's bioweapons program. But the courier never made the drop. He injected himself instead. She stared at the covered body. Why? The scarred man stepped closer, lowering his voice, "Because someone told him the target was you, that you were the defector, and the only way to kill you without triggering international incident was to make it look like an accident, a lab leak, a containment breach." Her blood went cold despite the atropine fever flushing her skin. The SEAL had been conned into suicide as an assassination weapon. He wasn't trying to survive. He was trying to take her with him. The titanium case clicked shut. The scarred man removed a tablet, swiping to a classified document stamped with a date 3 weeks prior. SIGINT intercept, Belarusian chatter. They mention a blonde American scientist hiding in a civilian hospital. They mention your real name. They mention a price, $5 million for confirmation of death. She felt the floor tilt. 3 years of silence, 3 years of empty apartments and dead phones and scrubbing surgical trays in the pre-dawn hours. They had found her anyway, not because she slipped, because someone inside Usamrichted had sold her location. The scarred man nodded as he watched understanding dawn in her eyes. "We have a mole, and they have 12 more vials of Aegir, enough to contaminate a municipal water supply. Enough to clear a city block." She looked at the SEAL's body. If he was the delivery mechanism, who was the buyer? The scarred man didn't answer. Instead, he pulled the sheet back from the SEAL's face. The man was young, early 20s, unremarkable, except for a tattoo on his collarbone, a raven, same as the patch on the scarred man's shoulder. "He was one of ours," the scarred man said quietly. "A rookie, his first solo insertion. Someone fed him bad intel and good poison." She reached out, her hand still trembling, and touched the tattoo. The ink was fresh, still raised. He had been recruited specifically for this, a disposable courier with a death sentence. The major pivot came with a phone call. The scarred man's radio crackled. He listened, face hardening, then shoved the tablet toward her. CCTV footage from the parking garage. 40 minutes ago, a figure in a hazmat suit transferring a case from a civilian sedan to an ambulance. The timestamp matched the SEAL's arrival. But the figure was 5'6", female gait. The suit had a tear in the left sleeve. Red fabric visible underneath. She knew that tear. She had made it herself 3 days ago, catching her scrub sleeve on a gurney rail. The figure on the screen was her, or someone wearing her clothes, her specific size, her specific walk. "They've already started the frame," the scarred man said. By morning, the CDC will have a report. Elena Voss, rogue biochemist, releases weaponized nerve agent in Metropolitan Hospital. Suicide by guilt. Case closed. The real sellers vanish with the remaining vials. And you become the ghost who took 5,000 people with her. She looked at the seal, at the tattoo, at the footage of her own doppelganger. The room tilted again, but this time from rage. Not toxin. She grabbed the tablet. I need the synthesis rig now, not to save myself, to prove I didn't do this. The scarred man studied her for a long moment, then nodded to his team. Clear the lab. Give her whatever she wants. But Dr. Voss, if you try to run, if you try to destroy evidence, I'll put you down myself. She was already moving toward the pharmacy, scribbling chemical compounds on a purple glove with a shaking hand. Diazepam, pyridostigmine, and something else. Something she hadn't dared to write down in Act 1. A marker compound. A radioactive tracer she had embedded in batch. 7-9 Bravo during synthesis. Invisible to standard detection, but traceable with the right scanner. If the mole had stolen her samples, the tracer would be in every vial. And if she could isolate it from the seal's blood, she could prove the theft. Prove the timeline. Prove she wasn't the woman in the parking garage, but she needed the seal's body to do it. She needed to bring him back from death itself. The scarred man blocked her path as she reached for a crash cart. He's gone. Flatline for 8 minutes. Brain death is certain. Then get me a perfusion pump, she snapped, and a cardiac bypass. If he's brain dead, he won't feel it when I drain his blood, filter the toxin, and prove he was murdered. The scarred man's radio crackled again, urgent. The FBI had just locked down the hospital perimeter. They were coming up. 5 minutes. They weren't there to help. They were there to arrest her. The scarred man looked at the door, then at her. Do it. But if you're lying about the tracer, if this is just a stalling tactic to destroy evidence, remember what I said. She didn't answer. She was already attaching leads to the dead man's chest. The scarred man turned to his team. Hold that elevator. No one gets in. And as the first sounds of federal boots echoed in the stairwell, Elena Voss began to pump her own poison out of a corpse's veins, praying the trace evidence hadn't degraded, praying the man with the raven tattoo hadn't died for nothing, and knowing that in 4 minutes she would either have proof of her innocence or a bullet in her skull from whichever side reached her first. The pump hummed at 3,000 revolutions per minute, forcing the seal's blood through the filtration membrane. Elena watched the readout, her vision still blurred by atropine, her own heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The Geiger counter sat silent. Come on. She adjusted the flow rate, increasing the centrifugal force. If the tracer had degraded, if the half-life had expired during the years in storage, she had nothing. The stairwell door burst open somewhere down the hall. Shouts echoed. Federal agents. The scarred man drew his sidearm, aiming at the doorway. 2 minutes. The counter clicked. Once, then again. A steady staccato. She grabbed the printout, the radioactive signature glowing in spectral peaks on the graph. Batch 7-9 Bravo confirmed. Stolen from cryogenic storage at USAMRIC-D. Dated 3 years prior, before she disappeared. This proved she hadn't synthesized it yesterday. This proved theft. She spun toward the scarred man, holding the paper like a shield. I didn't release this. It was stolen from my vault, but he wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the seal's exposed torso, where the blood filtration lines entered the femoral artery. His face had gone gray. What? She followed his gaze. The entry point. The tattoo. The raven. It wasn't fresh ink, it was scar tissue. Raised keloid ridges. The tattoo was 10 years old, not 10 days. This man wasn't a rookie, he was a ghost. Retired status. Black file. She knew him. Or rather, she knew of him. Call sign. Corvus. The only operative who ever tested A-gear in the field and survived, because he had been immunized. Her hands trembled as she grabbed the filtered plasma, holding it to the light. The antibody markers were there. Gamma globulin spikes specific to the A-gear molecular structure. Someone had given him the antidote before he ever reached the hospital, before he was exposed. Which meant he hadn't been trying to kill her with the injection. He had been trying to warn her. The toxin in his system wasn't the weapon. It was the message. The scarred man's radio crackled with a voice she recognized. Deputy Director Vance, secure the room, terminate the subject. The scarred man froze. Elena saw the conflict ripple across his features. 10 years of command structure versus 10 minutes of proof. He looked at the Geiger counter, at the tattoo, at her. Vance is coming up, he said quietly. Not FBI, private military. They have the remaining vials. And they're not here to arrest you, they're here to release them. Into the ventilation. The realization struck her like physical force. The frame wasn't just about blaming her for the SEAL's death. It was about blaming her for a mass casualty event. A hospital full of dead civilians, all killed by her stolen toxin, with her alive just long enough to confess before she conveniently died in the outbreak. The scarred man lowered his weapon. We have 90 seconds before they reach this floor. The vents are on a separate circuit. If they reach the main HVAC control room, they can flood every ward. She was already moving, ripping the IV lines from her own arm, grabbing the vial of filtered tracer. We need to get to the roof. The helicopter. He shook his head. Vance disabled it. Then we take the stairs down. No, he grabbed her wrist, hard. Listen, the only way to stop this is to prove the theft in real time, to show the world that Aegir was stolen government property before it hits the air. And the only place with that security footage is the USAMRIITD mainframe, which is 60 miles away. She looked at the blood pump, still cycling the dead man's fluids. No, it's here. She tapped the filtered plasma. The tracer has a satellite-linked isotope signature. Every vial from batch 7 was tagged for tracking. If I can boost the signal, if I can get this to a military frequency instead of just medical, the signature will ping the National Guard satellite grid. It will prove the toxin was in government storage yesterday, not brewed in my basement. But I need a transmitter. Military grade. He looked at his radio. Then he looked at the door. They'll kill us both the second we step into that hallway. Not both, she said. Just you. She grabbed his radio, smashed it against the counter, and yanked out the transponder chip. If they think you're dead, if they think the room is secure, you can flank them. He understood immediately. He pulled a fragmentation grenade from his vest, not to throw, but to trigger the pin mechanism. He tossed it into the corner of the room. Smoke screen, M84 flashbang, 3 seconds. Cover your ears. The explosion was deafening even through her palms. The lights shattered. Smoke billowed. She heard Vance's voice scream through the debris. Subject down, room secure, move to phase 2, vent release. Boots pounded away from the door, toward the HVAC room. The scarred man grabbed her arm, pulling her through the smoke into the hallway. They think we're dead in there. You have maybe 4 minutes before they realize the vents aren't dispersing the toxin because I disabled the fan array from the junction box yesterday during inspection. She stared at him. You knew? I suspected, he said, dragging her toward the service elevator. Vance transferred 12 vials last week. I just didn't know where or who. Now I do. They reached the elevator. He jammed the transponder chip into her palm. The roof has a communications array, emergency military band. If you can boost the tracer signal through that, every receiver in the eastern seaboard will pick up the ping. It will prove the theft. It will prove you're innocent. But Vance will be there. He'll be waiting. She stepped into the elevator. Then you'd better hurry, she said, because if I die on that roof, the only person who knows how to synthesize the antidote for the 12 vials he's about to release dies with me. And 20 minutes later, so does everyone in this building. The doors closed. The scarred man turned toward the stairwell, raising his weapon. And Elena Voss began her ascent toward the only radio that could save 5,000 lives, carrying proof of her innocence in a plastic vial, and knowing that the man who had hunted her for 3 years was now the only thing standing between her and a bullet. The elevator chimed roof access. The doors parted to a blast of cold rotor wash from the disabled Blackhawk and the sodium glow of the city 12 stories below. Deputy Director Vance stood beside the communications array, a titanium case open at his feet, 11 amber vials nestled in foam like wasps in a hive. He held a 12th in his gloved hand, already uncapped, the liquid wicking into the breeze. One breath of that vapor and the rooftop would become a hot zone. He raised his sidearm, not at her, at the array. Step away from the transmitter, Dr. Voss, or I shatter the uplink, release the vials, and 5,000 people die wondering why their nurse murdered them. Elena stepped out, the transponder chip biting into her palm, the vial of filtered plasma warm against her ribs. You won't release them. You're not a terrorist. You're a profiteer. She moved left, forcing his aim to track her, away from the equipment. You stole Aegir to sell it, to PMCs, to foreign bidders. Kill a hospital and you have no product, no leverage. Vance smiled. Wrong. I have the only existing antidote stockpile. Release the toxin, control the cure. That's the business model. But I need a patsy. You... He tilted the open vial. Now, drop the chip. Behind him, the stairwell door exploded inward. The scarred man stumbled through, tactical vest, smoking, blood sheeting down his left arm from a shrapnel wound. He raised his weapon, but his hand shook. Vance didn't even turn. Captain Hale, you're late and empty. He was right. The slide on Hale's pistol was locked back. Dry, Elena saw her opening. She lunged for the array, slamming the transponder into the emergency military uplink port. The screen flickered. Satellite acquisition. 90 seconds to handshake. Vance spun, firing. The bullet sparked off the transmitter housing. She ducked, ripping the vial from her pocket, screwing it into the sample injection port. The Geiger counter inside the unit clicked alive. The tracer signal bloomed across the screen. Vance fired again. The round tore through her shoulder, spinning her against the railing. Pain detonated white-hot, but her hand stayed on the vial. Signal confirmed, she gasped. Batch 7-9 Bravo, stolen from USAMRIC cryovault. Date of theft, March 3rd, 3 years ago. Thief, Deputy Director Vance Authentication, Elena Voss. Nobody's listening, Vance snarled, advancing. Every receiver is listening, Hale shouted, coughing blood. Emergency military band, you just broadcast your own inventory to the National Guard. Vance froze. Then he laughed. Fine, let them know. By the time they mobilize, the cloud is airborne. He raised the open vial high, preparing to hurl it into the rotor blades of the disabled helicopter to aerosolize it across the intake vents. Elena pushed off the railing, her injured arm hanging useless, her good hand scrambling across the array's keyboard. Not just the proof, she yelled. The antidote. Attention all stations. This is Dr. Elena Voss. Do not attempt standard atropine pralidoxime protocol. Repeat, standard protocol fails. A-gear requires blood-brain barrier penetration. Modify pralidoxime chloride with methyl substitution at the quaternary nitrogen. Increase lipid solubility by 40%. Combine with diazepam and pyridostigmine base. Inject intrathecally, spinal canal, bypasses peripheral block. She was shouting the formula into the mic, her voice cracking, the words tasting like copper. Confirm receipt. Confirm. The screen blinked, signal transmitted. Vance screamed, a sound of pure financial rage, and threw the vial, but Hale was already moving. He tackled Vance low, driving him into the helicopter's skids. The vial tumbled, end over end. Elena caught it, barehanded, the glass slick with her own blood. She capped it. Hale pinned Vance, pressing a knee into his throat until the struggle stopped. The scarred man looked up at her, gray-faced from blood loss. Did they get it, the formula? Elena slumped against the array, the toxin in her own veins finally overwhelming the atropine. Her vision tunneled. The bullet wound was secondary. The self-injection from the trauma bay was killing her now. 3 hours later, the organophosphorus binding irreversibly without the antidote she had just described but couldn't reach. They got it, she whispered. They have to synthesize it. 20 minutes. You're not going to make 20 minutes, Hale said quietly. I know. Then the elevator chimed again. The doors opened on a gurney, pushed by 2 medics in full mop gear. On it lay the SEAL, Corvus. His eyes were open, clear, alive. The cardiac monitor on the gurney showed a steady, strong heartbeat. He sat up, ripping off the oxygen mask, and in his hand he held an auto-injector. The label read LLNL02 Experimental. Blood-brain barrier permeable. Field antidote, he rasped, his voice raw from intubation. Hale slipped it to me in the trauma bay while you were fighting for the proof, I was fighting for the cure. He tossed the injector to Hale, who caught it one-handed and plunged it into Elena's thigh without hesitation. The relief was instantaneous, like ice water flooding a burn. Her diaphragm unlocked, her vision cleared. She stared at the SEAL. You were dead. Flatline. 8 minutes. Technique you taught us, Corvus said, swinging his legs off the gurney, wincing as his own wounds pulled. Tetrodotoxin derivative. Simulates death. Slows metabolism to 1%. Bought me time. Bought us time. He looked at Vance, who Hale was cuffing with plastic ties. I wasn't the delivery boy. I was the trap. And you, Doctor, were the jaws. Military helicopters crested the horizon. Real ones. Black Hawks with running lights, the cavalry, arriving 4 minutes late. Elena looked from Corvus to Hale to the vial in her hand. You planned this, the injection, the frame. You knew Vance would try to sell the stockpile. We knew someone would, Hale said, slumping back, finally letting the pain take him as the medics swarmed him. We didn't know who we needed them to surface, and we needed to know if you could still save lives when it mattered. He managed a bloody smile. You passed. Corvus stood, steadying himself against the gurney. He reached into his tactical vest and withdrew a photograph. He held it out to her. It showed a laboratory in a country she didn't recognize. Equipment that looked like hers. Aegir synthesis markers. They've reverse-engineered it. Foreign asset. 6 months ahead of us on the weaponization, but they can't crack the antidote. They don't have you. Elena took the photo with trembling fingers. The antidote was warming her blood, saving her, but the look in Corvus's eyes told her the audition was over. The real test was just beginning. She wasn't fighting for her innocence anymore. She was fighting for her second act. She took the photo with trembling fingers. The antidote was warming her blood, saving her, but the look in Corvus's eyes told her the audition was over. The real test was just beginning. 3 weeks later, the official story listed Deputy Director Vance as the victim of a tragic helicopter accident during a training exercise. The hospital incident was classified as a chemical spill, contained 0 casualties. Elena Voss remained officially dead, but in a secure facility beneath the Virginia countryside. She worked 16-hour days in a laboratory more advanced than anything she had known at USAMRICT. They didn't ask her to build weapons anymore. They asked her to unbuild them, to hunt the molecular signatures she had created, now scattered across 3 continents, and neutralize them before they reached subway systems, water supplies, crowded stadiums. The seal she had saved, Corvus, became her handler. The scarred man, Hale, her security. They were ghosts protecting a ghost, ensuring that the scientist who once designed perfect poisons now designed perfect cures, always staying one synthesis ahead of those who would use her old work to fill mass graves. We often wonder where safety comes from. We assume it arrives in uniforms, in flags, in proclamations. But sometimes it arrives in the form of a woman drawing her own blood in a desperate gamble, trading her anonymity for our tomorrow. Sometimes redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about carrying it like a weapon, pointed only at the darkness. If this story moved you, if you believe that the people who build the antidotes deserve the same recognition as those who wield the swords, then stay with us. Subscribe, because the next time you walk through a crowded street, breathing easily, someone like Elena Voss may be the reason why.